You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a podcast supported by listeners like you. To contribute, visit patreon.com/I Have Some Notes. All right, Greg. Disaster movies are all the rage. Let's do one about tornadoes.
That's a great idea. Like a big-ass tornado threatens a town, and the only ones that can help are a motley crew of storm chasers.
I like what you're laying down with the storm chasers, but I'm thinking multiple tornadoes. All within 24 hours, all within a few miles from each other, one after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, after
I have some notes.
after another, after another, after another, after another, after another.
Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks on mediocre movies. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver, and I'm hot as balls.
Yeah, I'm hot as triangles.
I am hot as cubes, hypercubes.
Cones, I should have said cones.
Yeah, that was the one. That was the transition.
Three-dimensional shape. Yeah.
I was going for a four-dimensional shape. We at time of recording, we're in the midst of the first heat wave of the summer.
Yeah.
You might think that it doesn't get blisteringly hot in Canada, but it do, and it is unpleasant. And when it does,
yeah, we're a northern climate, and we're used to the cold. Like cold, we can deal with. It's when it gets intensely hot that we're all just like whining and complaining.
Yeah.
Minus 30, no problem.
Yeah.
Plus 30,
too hot.
Please let me die.
Yeah.
Our houses are designed to retain heat, not excise it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Air conditioners have been a hot commodity the last few days. They've been flying off the shelves.
Yeah, that weather, it's unpredictable. It's forces beyond our control. The weather really is ripe for unique life experiences, be it heat waves or tornadoes.
Whoa, segue.
There it is.
Segue. We are watching the movie. We watched the movie Twister, released in 1996, directed by Jen de Bont, or Jen de Bon, if you're nasty. Written by Michael Crichton and Anne-Marie Martin, and based on The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, well, it's got a sequel coming out. Actually, it might be out by the time this episode lands. And so we thought, what better time to tackle the sort of original than just before its sort of sequel comes out.
Yeah, is it a sequel or a remake?
Is it a remake?
I guess a remake?
Could be. I was under the impression that it was more of like a sequel to it. But I could be mistaken.
It'd be strange because I thought in the trailers, this is going to be a horrible pod because by the time this comes out, everyone will have seen the movie and how you guys be like, you guys are idiots. But I thought that Dorothy was in Twisters. So they were still like, if it's a sequel, they're still working on the exact same technology, trying to
I don't think so.
Accomplish the same goal. Okay.
According to Google, it is in fact a standalone sequel to the 1996 movie Twister. So.
Well, yeah, they really left so much meat on the bones in this one. You really got to pick up the story and carry on these characters' legacy, right? I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine. This movie was fine. It starred Helen Hunt as Dr. Joe Harding, Bill Paxton as Bill Harding, Carrie Elways as Dr. Jonas Miller, and Jamie Gertz as Dr. Melissa Reeves.
Lots of doctors in this movie.
Yeah. Did I say Carrie Elways, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I did. Okay, sweet. Yay.
Got it.
I'm like, I've heard that name spoken out loud before. Was this your first time watching this one, or had you guys seen it before?
Goodness, no. I believe I saw this in theaters when it first came out, which kind of dates me a little. But yeah, I seem to remember seeing it on the big screen. And then I'm sure I must have rented it at some point. And then it was one of those movies that was frequently on like Spike TV. So like I've seen bits and pieces of it dozens of times, but I've probably not watched the whole thing front to end in like a decade or more.
I'm sure that this is my fourth or fifth time seeing it by now. Yeah, like Scott said, I think it was a movie that got put onto TV quite a bit in the late 90s, early aughts. It's kind of a great movie to throw on TV because there's really not. It's very PG and not a lot of swearing. I don't remember counting any F words or anything like that. So
I think Bill says an F word somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Well, he's being pelted with debris at one point, but it's pretty quick and it's easy to miss.
Yeah.
I had actually never seen it. There's a slim chance I saw it when I was a kid. But if I did, I don't remember a thing about it. So this, for all intents and purposes, was my first time with it. And it's exactly what I thought it would be. It's not even a slam against. It's not a slam against it. It's just like, I'm like, oh, it's a disaster movie about tornadoes. Great. Nailed it. Yeah, they did it.
Yep.
They had scenes with tornadoes and then scenes in between the tornadoes that just give you enough reason to care about the characters before moving on to another scene with tornadoes.
Speaking of the characters, this movie has an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the cast, right? Like most of the tornadoes.
Yes. Yeah. The characters, no.
No, but the cast is great. Yeah. Like there is some like quality actors in small and bit parts in this movie. The tornado chasers, most of them are like names. Like it's crazy.
I just want to wind back a little bit to characterizing this movie as a disaster movie. I'm going to say something that's maybe possibly stupid, but here we go. I feel like it has more common threads with like a horror thriller than it does a disaster movie, because the tornadoes are almost like characterized as monsters. And in fact, the tornadoes roar. They like Jan de Bont used a bunch of animal sounds for the sound effects of the tornadoes. So I like a disaster, like a typical disaster movie features, at least one scene of like massive obliteration. This one has like a town that gets destroyed, but usually there's like some sort of centerpiece and of destruction, and usually you get to see the effects it has on government and all this kind of stuff. But this feels much more focused and tight compared to most disaster flicks. Yeah,
number one. In regards to the tornadoes roaring, Nita thought that was real dumb. But number two, I kind of agree with you. Disaster movies to me are more movies about a disaster happening and then people having to like survive during and after the disaster, right? And that doesn't really happen here. This is a weird sort of different kind of action movie, which is interesting because it is about a natural disaster, but
it's not a disaster movie. It's a Michael Crichton movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of this like larger than life force, just sort of like terrorizing people who willfully put themselves in the harm's way of it, whether that's some kind of contagion or a big dinosaur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the resolution isn't necessarily defeating the violent force. It's just either escaping it or, in this case, learning more about it and having more ability to study it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned Michael Crichton, and Jurassic Park is more of a disaster movie than this, which is interesting. But I can see some DNA, some dino DNA in this one. Because there's definitely some of that Michael Crichton like science disaster stuff going on here, and I dig it. It's almost like its own genre. Is this the Sharknado genre? Is this the genesis of the Sharknado genre?
Yeah, I was wondering how long before we brought up Sharknado. I almost put it in the pitch.
Interesting. It also has technology theft in it, just like Jurassic Park.
That's true. Yeah. Huh.
Mm-hmm. Right way you know, I guess.
Yeah.
Fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised to find out that this was the second highest grossing movie of 1996. This was a big one. Whereas I don't know that it like everyone's like, oh yeah, Twister. It's the tornado movie.
Yeah,
like it's remembered the same way Dante's Peak or yeah are remembered.
See, now, without looking, do either of you know which was the highest grossing movie of 1996? Each take a guess.
96. What else came out in 96?
95 was a big year. I think I'm going to say Toy Story, but I think that was 94. But my guess is Toy Story.
I'm trying to remember what else came out in 96. God, the 90s were so long ago and it's all a blur.
Is it Godzilla?
No, it is not Godzilla.
Okay.
Yeah, Godzilla kind of bombed actually, didn't it?
Yep.
What else was contemporary with Twister?
I'll give you a hint. Your Godzilla pick is not that far off.
Green Day?
All right, this bit is going on too long. It was Independence Day.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
So people like stuff blowing up. What can I say?
Yep.
Yeah, this definitely didn't, at least to me, it didn't feel like a 90s movie though. It not necessarily a great movie, but it was kind of timeless. It was fairly like nothing about it seemed of a time.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense.
Kinda, yeah.
To the point where the Dorothy technology, the idea of these like little drone, these little balls that get whipped up and send readings back to a computer so they can study the inside of the tornado. When I was thinking about what we might see in this Twisters sequel coming out right away here, I'm like, oh, that's just like we actually have that technology. It's not some kind of like near future leap of science fiction invention.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just a bunch of drones. They could absolutely make that if they haven't already. So, felt timeless, this particular movie.
Yeah, it's so much so that like when you watch the trailer for the new Twisters that's coming out, it feels and looks like the same movie. It doesn't like, which I haven't seen it, but it makes you wonder whether it was necessary or not.
Yeah,
I guess we'll see.
It's hard. It's sort of hard to have those like 90s or 2024, cultural time touchstones when every set is just open fields of Oklahoma and the wind.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is it still looks quite good. All those tornadoes are computer effects, and most of them hold up pretty okay. I would say that the only one that looks a little dicey is the sister tornadoes that were in the water. But other than that, I couldn't really tell practical from animated in a lot of scenes.
A good mix of CGI and practical effects, I think, and that works. That's, I think, one of the reasons why it doesn't look really gross and dated is because they knew where to draw the line.
Can I tell you how hardcore they were on the practical side of things?
Sure.
In the scene where there's a tornado going through the farm, right? And they're driving away from combines that were falling. Those are real combines, and they were dropped from a helicopter.
Damn, yeah. Some of those dropping car stunts, I was like, that was a very planned, well executed stunt.
Yeah.
That there is no way that vehicle did not fall within a few feet of that other vehicle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very impressive. Yeah, that's that fun old movie magic making of like, no, we just got to pull this crazy spectacle off instead of just digitally dropping tractors on each other like assholes.
Yeah, and the tragedy is if that movie was made just, I'm going to say like 10 years later, most of the effects would have been CGI, and I don't think it would look as good.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, the temptation. I mean, it's going to be really interesting seeing this new one because and be able to compare and contrast. I'm sure, like with the thing with CGI, and we've talked about stuff like this before, but there's a real temptation because you have full control over everything to really go big and just make the biggest, baddest explosion or whatever that you can. And sometimes going that far over the top kind of prevents the movie from feeling grounded. And I think a movie that is just about tornadoes, something that we're all very familiar with, and some of us have probably experienced personally. It's the kind of thing that wouldn't benefit from big over the top special effects.
One of the practical effects I thought they used quite well, or to quite good effect, really brought me into it, really got me excited about what I was watching, was that scene where for like a minute, it's just a different movie and we get a clip of The Shining. That was really fun. I wish more mediocre movies just stopped being that movie and became a movie I liked for 2 minutes. That was delightful. That was a lot of fun.
Interesting you bring up The Shining because at the day that we're recording, the irreplaceable Shelley Duvall passed away. So,
yeah, rest in power.
Yep.
But which is also funny because when we did, not funny that Shelley Duvall died. Movies with The Shining in them is what's funny. When we did Ready Player One, I complained loudly about the Shining scene in that because it breaks it just sort of spoiled it by contextualizing that movie in a weird way, whereas this was a perfectly reasonable inclusion of a huge chunk of The Shining.
Yeah, and it plays on the horror motif that I'm fairly certain that the movie was going for.
Yeah, and what I was saying with the it's a practical effect that works by evoking the "Here's Johnny" axe scene right as this tornado rips through town. You're like, parallels.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Well, it's also just a fun gag where all of a sudden, just out of the blue, it's like, wait, what happened? Who switched the reel? And then it pulls back, and we're at the. It
pulls back
drive-in.
slowly to show you the drive-through. But yeah, no, more movies should do that. Like, you guys have kids. You're probably gonna have to drag them to like Garfield or something this summer. And can you just imagine if a chunk of the way through Garfield, it just becomes Blade Runner for a minute? There you go.
Is that now, Liam? I just want to ask, just based on your comments so far, did you have a bad time with this movie?
Nope.
Or I
did not have a bad time. I did not have a great time.
Okay.
But I did not have a bad time. This is one of those ones that was. We do some movies that are all over the place, lots of good, lots of bad. We do some where it's just so bad it's unsalvageable. We do some that are too good to really give meaningful notes. This one was just like, yeah, this was good. Good job. You did the tornado. Especially because I don't want to get too far into my fixes here, but all the tornado beats, the scenes where there is action and tornadoes work great. The geography made sense. The action was tense. The different effects like 2 tornadoes, falling tractors, whatever, stuck under a bridge. That all worked great. It was the in-between stuff that kind of, had me looking at my watch or rolling my eyes and being like, can we get back to more tornadoes, please? And I think the movie's at its weakest when there are not tornadoes on screen.
That's the point where all the characters should be asking, where are the tornadoes? And in fairness, that's usually what they're asking at that point in the movie.
They've got tools to measure where the tornadoes. But yeah, I found a lot of, I don't know if you guys had the same experience or takeaway, but I really found the tension between Joe and Bill to be extremely surface level and contrived.
Nita actually had asked partway through us watching if there was a way that we could remove the love story from the film. And I was like, I don't know that we can. And it's because Melissa is so important as the audience insert character.
Yeah.
You need someone along for the ride who has no idea what's going on so that the brainiacs can explain the tornado science for the audience. So she actually is important, and her being along with Bill makes sense for that, is just the sad truth.
Yeah. I wouldn't even say, though my fix does give Melissa more agency and interesting things to do. I really was specifically the tension, like not even the romantic subplot at all, but the specific tension, because when they're bickering, it's presented as this like two people who've known each other for years, know each other inside and out, and they're bickering like a married couple bickers. That's what you're supposed to take away, but it really just comes off as Bill Paxton's character being a insufferable, insecure baby at best, and a downright toxic, manipulative asshole at worst. And then Helen Hunt's character, Joe, just kind of saying and doing reasonable things.
Yeah, the movie doesn't do a great job explaining why Bill left. It gives a really surface reason, and it gives no explanation for why he quit tornado chasing. Like, he just left Joe and then got a weatherman job. And it's like, why did you stop being a tornado hunter? And that's, we're spilling into fixes at this point. But
I bet we've probably came to similar conclusions, because that was my takeaway as well.
I don't know. I don't know that I had felt like the character of Bill was quite as poorly developed as you suggest, Liam. But you guys are right that is a fairly big gap. That his reasoning for not chasing tornadoes anymore is actually quite important, and would fill in a lot of gaps for us as to like what his and Helen Hunt's relationship dynamic was, and how it can be mended for sure. But I mean, we're getting into a lot of our other lists. Maybe we should probably read the trailer or the plot summary.
There is a mystery, elusive, unpredictable, violent. It terrifies most scientists. But for a new breed, the challenge is saving lives. The research is deadly. The laboratory is nature itself.
And potentially could be a storm that has a winds in excess. Let's assume the worst at this point.
Joe! Bill! It's coming! Everybody underground now! Joe, come on! Get underground! Take cover right now!
Joe Harding was a little girl when a vicious F5 tornado absconded with her father, fueling a lifelong desire to chase twisters in the most reckless way possible. She and her estranged husband Bill developed sensors that, once released into a tornado, could gather enough data to create better early warning systems. After their separation, Bill said, "Game over, man," and left the storm-chasing life. Later, he tracks down Joe and her ragtag team of tornado obsessives with divorce papers in hand. He's marrying his new squeeze, Melissa, and polygamy is frowned upon by Uncle Sam. Land of the free, indeed. But Joe has her own surprise for Bill. She's completed work on the sensor deployment system. Dorothy, as it is cleverly called, is ready to see the wizard, as it were, and Bill can't resist tagging along. Bill then learns his arch-rival, Dr. Jonas Miller, has stolen the designs for Dorothy. He punches Jonas on national television, which most people don't know was apparently legal in the 90s. What follows is a series of physics-defying storm chases, culminating in the destruction of Joe's aunt's house. Also, Melissa pieces out because her fiancé is still clearly in love with his wife. In the end, they staple product placements to the sensors to help them fly, and we learn that Joe and Bill are totally immune to debris.
I want to get back to the movie characters and how they're characterized, but I just want to take a quick moment to talk about the inconsistency in the movie's rules as to how a tornado affects various objects around it. because that was entirely confusing and very laughable at times. Like as good as the tornado scenes are, like when there's a truck getting blown around, like literally a semi-truck being blown around, and this Chevy is still on the ground, not being pushed or pulled or anything. Like what is it? Is it super powerful or is it not?
Well, it's that plot armor weighs 1,000 kilograms.
Yeah, it sure does.
Plot armor is the heaviest kind of armor and prevents you from getting sucked up in a tornado. I had the same thought though, where I'm like, wouldn't that be like, yeah.
I understand that like filming an action movie that involves weather is difficult, especially something like wind, which the audience cannot see really. You know, it reminds me of The Day After Tomorrow, when they wanted to have a scene where the weather was turning cold really fast, and you get this really awkward chase of Frost versus man as they run across the city of New York. Yeah, it just seems inherently silly. So yeah, it didn't take me out of the movie too much. It just gave me a chuckle.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we have a lot of thoughts on the characterization and maybe some thoughts on the presentation of the tornadoes. So let's head on into our fixes for Twister.
I'd like to get more reading done, and joining a book club seems like a good idea, but I don't know.
Why not?
Reading a whole book in a month, that's pretty daunting.
What if it was just a chapter, say a week?
That doesn't sound too bad. Still, getting together with a bunch of people, that's a whole evening.
Well, what if it was only half an hour, whenever you wanted to?
That would be great.
The Read Along, a mini book club for your ears.
Join my wife Anita
and my husband Scott
as we take you on a journey through a good book,
one chapter at a time. Available right now on your podcatcher of choice.
Welcome back. We're talking Twister. We got some fixes. Greg, Scott, who wants to go first?
My fix is mostly for the back half of the movie. So if any of you have some like earlier stuff you want to toss out there.
I do. My fixes are almost entirely the top of the movie.
Perfect.
Okay, so I've broken it. Sometimes when I write out my thoughts, I end up kind of rambling and like reading an essay. So I've broken it up. My biggest problem and my fixes for it, and then want to hear your guys' thoughts. But if it's sort of like, if this, then that, if we change it how I say we do, what does that mean for Jonas? What does that mean for Melissa? And what does that mean for the other storm chasers? So I'll hold those thoughts till after, just so I'm not rambling.
Cool. And it's interesting that you're going to touch on Jonas because he is part of my fix for the end. So
sick. So as I said in the top half there, I found Bill to be insufferable. There he is, like I said, he is projecting his insecurities on completely reasonable things that Joe says. Sometimes it verges on toxic or manipulative, but mostly it's just like he's a big baby. Like the number of times he's like, oh, I know that tone. I know that tone. It's like, she didn't say anything, dude. Like, you know, when you hear a couple argue and sometimes you're like, ooh, I don't want to get involved because, you know, I don't know the dynamic. And then other times you hear a couple argue, it's like, I don't want to get involved because I'm going to point out that one of them is definitely being unreasonable. And that was this, where I was like, buddy, she didn't say anything. She just, like, I just did not like his character. He was obnoxious, abrasive, and mostly insecure. And then they do touch on some of Joe's trauma about losing her dad to tornadoes and how that is now manifested in very ambitious tornado chasing. But I felt that kind of came a little late in the movie and wasn't explored thoroughly enough. So not only is there friction paper thin and uninteresting, but also there's just sort of this imbalance, right? It's not just not genuine conflict, but also it's not equal. He's accusatory and weird, and she has this like bubbling trauma that we don't see until later. My fix is even them out by having their conflict be a little bit more push and pull, give and take. So I think Joe needs the nickname The Extreme. I think she's the thrill seeker with a death wish, which seems kind of cool, but she's doing it because of trauma. We all saw the cold open. She's got this like death wish because she's trying to avenge her father. Whereas Bill plays it a little more safe, and he's much more interested in the science of the weather at large, hence the sort of, weak-ass weatherman job.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very controlling person, but it's a little more like neurotic and less toxic than it's presented. So he's kind of controlling, and she wants to just go nuts and put herself and others in jeopardy. And that's where the friction comes from. Her devil-may-care attitude and his difficulty worrying about her, but also kind of like holding her back. Perhaps even at one point we learn that years ago, maybe the reason he quit, we were talking about how that's never brought up, the reason he quit storm chasing, is that she took a risk that he calculated would be too much, and it turns out he was right, and they almost died. So now he's noped out of it, and that's why he left, both the storm chasing gig and their marriage. Because he just can't stand there and watch her kill herself.
That's great motivation. That's great motivation. Yep.
So to that end, you change that first beat. He doesn't just show up to get divorce papers signed coincidentally on the day that a half dozen huge tornadoes are all going to hit one after the other in the same region. Pretty big coincidence. I think she called him and asked him to bring the crazy invention that he left to work on and has been working on since he left, Dorothy. So she's the crazy storm chaser. He's the science nerd. He's the science guy. Yeah. And he's been working on Dorothy. And he says he'll only bring Dorothy if she signs the divorce papers. And then, as normal, they get caught up chasing tornadoes like the movie does. But those downtime scenes are much more of a push and pull of like her ambition and his control issues. You can't control the weather, Bill. Joe is like a tornado. She does as she pleases and nothing can stop her. Bill's got to learn to like take a little more risks and chill out. And in doing so helps Joe get over the trauma to get the closure she needs to not be self-destructive.
I like these character arcs.
Those are the arcs for them. That's what I had.
You still keep Melissa there. She's still along with Bill.
Yep.
I like that. Yeah, it works.
So speaking of Melissa, I just did want to, I still think she works as the audience insert, but I wanted to kind of give her a little more to do. Cause like the fact that she's just sort of there to like throw up her hands and panic, she still can, but I think just to give her a little more agency and like use in the plot other than victim, is she is some kind of computer science engineer who Bill met while working on Dorothy, and she's like all in the lab. She is like an in the lab computer scientist who helped Bill build Dorothy, or maybe even she built Dorothy and he helped her. And she's doing this and Bill's doing this because this is a device you can put in a tornado and leave. You don't have to walk up to it. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to risk your life. It is the ultimate safe way to measure a tornado. And then when she goes and gets roped into this traumatic danger, Bill is torn between protecting her from tornadoes and protecting Joe from herself. Yes, no?
That kind of works.
Yeah. If Melissa's
what's Greg's barometer on it? He's making a face on the camera.
I don't know if I have. We talked earlier about that character being a surrogate for the audience. So if you make her a kind of like a storm chaser as well, or not a storm chaser,
she's a computer scientist,
right? But still like someone who's involved with it, right? You don't have someone who's needing the tornadoes explained to, right?
I suppose. But I guess I sort of saw it as like her and Bill make Dorothy because Bill knows the weather science and she knows the computer science.
Mm-hmm.
So she still needs tornado shit explained to her. She just doesn't need computer stuff explained to her.
Okay.
I have a possible other fix.
Sure.
Just to pivot a little. What if instead about Bill having built Dorothy, we play off his having gotten this weatherman job? And Joe calls him up to come out because she's got something that's newsworthy, and she promises that if he comes out to cover it, she'll sign the divorce papers. And the newsworthy thing is that she's built Dorothy, and she wants him there to cover like the unleashing of this new weather technology. And so there's a story there, and he brings along Melissa again just because the divorce papers are going to get signed.
Yeah. I do like that a lot. I did have a wrinkle for the Jonas thing that maybe conflicts with that, but I think I like yours better than what I had here. But I think the reason Joe is so urgently calling Bill to be like, hey, you know this thing you've been making? Can you bring it, please? Please, I need it. I'll sign the divorce papers. That's how bad I need it. Is because not only is today the day these tornadoes are going to hit, so she needs, like, that's what on the phone, she's like, today's the day these tornadoes are going to hit. I need it today because this is going to be the best day to measure tornadoes. That's not really the reason. She knows that Jonas stole his research, and if he doesn't test his Dorothy today, Jonas is going to beat him to it. And she still cares enough about him to want him to successfully test this device he's been working on. So she kind of brings him there under false pretenses, and then we learn, oh, actually, and you know, Jonas has stolen the thing. And it's also motivation for Bill to like not nope out. He's like, fuck, now I do have to test it because that goddamn Jonas guy. So
yeah,
but I do. If we're not going to have Bill and Dorothy, Bill and Melissa make Dorothy, then what you said, Scott, is a great way to get Bill and Melissa on the scene.
Speaking of Dr. Jonas,
yep.
I don't think he should die. I think that was a really unnecessarily weird thing for the movie to do. And I think that there's an interesting character beat that we lose because of that, because we never find out why Bill and Jonas have beef, and we never get closure to that. And I think that should play into the finale of the movie. I think in Act 2, like in Act 1, we meet the rival storm chasers, the corporate team with their slick black cars, and Jake Busey riding in the computer truck, and in a bit part who's blink and you miss it. But we meet them. We establish that Bill has beef with Jonas. He hits him in the face on national television. Sure. Then in Act 2, both teams attempt to deploy their Dorothy units, and they both fail, but for different reasons. The deployment system that Joe and Bill are using is too light, which is already established. They don't have the anchor for it. And because Jonas's team is using those weird cube ones, they don't fly. They don't take off. And so both teams effectively fail, and then they both end up at the drive-through. And that's where you get more depth into what's going on. And I think that what's going on is that Jonas used to run with this crew. But he saw Joe and Bill as idea people who weren't getting anything done because they wanted proprietary control over this technology. They didn't want to sell out to the man, sell it off to some corporate entity, and then lose control of it. They wanted to build it themselves, but they didn't have the money. They were dumpster diving for technology. They've got this ragtag group that is their science team, quote unquote. And Jonas was like, you guys have all these great ideas. We just need to go and get like corporate backing for this. And when they shut him down, that caused the falling out. Basically, Jonas was like, you're never going to succeed. Goodbye. And he left. And Bill never forgave him for doing that. But Jonas built the machine. And it's a miracle that Joe was able to, but like Jonas did it. And he did it with the corporate backing. And I think that going into Act 3, Bill, realizing that their Dorothy unit is too light, realizes he needs Jonas's. Jonas built a better machine, and it sucks, and it kills him to have to admit it. But he goes to the corporate team and is like, if we want to make this science happen, we have to work together. And they bury the hatchet, and both teams work together to get the final 2 units out in the climax. And like, Jonas doesn't need to die. He doesn't need to be like in harm's way. He's back at the truck with the rest of the tornado hunters, with the rest of his team, because his team gets roughed up when the tornado hits the drive-through as well. So both teams are running on a skeleton crew. they need to work together, and then working together, they solve the problem at the end. And I think that wraps up that character arc really well, because then we learn what's going on between the two of them, and we get that nice little resolution at the end.
That, I like that a lot. Everything you said except for the him not dying part. I think everything you said should happen, and then right when they've buried the hatchet, he gets yeeted into a tornado. So that we can have more characters we care about die to a tornado. For the most part, anyone who dies to a tornado, I don't think anyone we really give a shit about dies.
No, it's basically Cary Elwes and his driver.
Yeah. So.
Oh, and Joe's dad at the beginning, I suppose.
Sure.
Yeah.
But we don't really know him that well, so.
Yeah. To go back to the cruise, the cruise and the one, this actually ties into what you're saying about changing Jonas's sort of arc and his cruise arc, if they all have to come together. When I was discussing the idea of like this sort of push and pull between Joe's Devil May Care, Death Wish, and Bill's neurotic need to control things. The group of storm chasers, fun as they were, especially Philip Seymour Hoffman, they're all basically the same character. None of them really sticks, other than like the fact that they have different jobs, and Philip Seymour Hoffman has like stoner vibes. They're all more or less the same character, and they all feel the same way about Joe, and they all feel the same way about Bill. And I think if we're going to hammer home my idea of like Joe's got a death wish because trauma and Bill's got control issues because science nerd, and cares about Joe, the storm chasers should represent the range of emotions you could feel about either of them.
I kind of agree.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's character should like hate that Bill was a control freak and be annoyed that he's back, because Joe is the extreme. She's the crazy storm chaser. He lives for this shit, and Bill's only going to slow them down. And then whoever was the scienciest one is excited Bill's back because he's had a hard time being the voice of reason since Bill left, and then everyone else can fall somewhere in between. And if we take what you said, Scott, where like there's now this triangle between Jonas, this like, used to be a trio, then his crew and the other crew can all have different feelings about that triangle dynamic.
Yeah, because Jonas used to run with them, and then he went corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He sold out to the man for the money so that he could actually get the science done. That seemed very important to I think that I don't want it to be very one-sided with Jonas. I think that we need to make it clear, like, Bill and Joe kind of have a point where it's their idea. They wanted to have control over it, and the company wanted it. But Jonas wanted to see it get done, and he didn't think that they could do it. And I'm even willing to say that in the third act, he says, you know what? I was wrong. I'm impressed. You guys built the thing. And you did it without all the corporate money. And much as I hate to admit it, I kind of admire you for having done that. That could be part of the burying the hatchet. And then he gets yeeted into a tornado, and that helps them feel bad. And actually, that kind of works because it's them having this reconciling moment with him, and then he gets killed when the tornado hits the drive-through, or the drive-in rather. And that can be one of the things, that and almost losing her aunt can be two of the big catalysts for Joe to realize that she's being too reckless, that she has been too reckless.
Yeah.
And that she needs to tone it back a little bit.
And now they have everything they need to succeed because Cary Elwes dead and his team is standing there with a vacuum in leadership. They can just absorb all of their resources for the big finale.
I'm glad earlier, Liam, that you commented on how the ragtag team are somewhat lifeless. That was a thing to me that stuck out the most, that you had all these different characters that had the veneer of being kind of like this wacky crew, but we don't really get to meet most of them and understand who they are. Aside from Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, who is a lot of fun and brings a lot of life to the movie. But I wanted to meet and understand everyone else. And I think it hit me while, like, I didn't really know what to do with that. But it hit me while you guys were talking about your fixes, that we could maybe adjust something that allows us to make some important characterizations with the ragtag team. And at the same time, Scott, I think I might be able to serve Nita's request of deleting the romance. So here we go. First of all, we delete Jonas and we make Bill Jonas. Bill and Joe both have claim over Dorothy, and their sort of competitive storm chasing nature leads them to a split. And now the central problem that we run into at the beginning of the movie is that they are both using the same technology that they have claim to. So they immediately have, that conflict. So that Bill and Joe are direct competitors with one another. And then
Joe's the scrappy ragtag team, and Bill is the one who went corporate and got all the money to do it himself.
Yeah, for sure. You can do it that way. And then you kind of soften Bill's character in the way that you've softened Jonas in your fixes, where he's got a kind of redemption arc, and then he's got to learn. Well, both of them can learn that they've got to be able to work together in order to make this thing truly work, right? And I feel that the characters, the ragtag team, they have that one couple. You don't really meet them. They barely talk, but they're both in the same RV all the time. So that I assume that they're a couple. They can act as the example to Bill and Joe, for how a relationship can actually, work appropriately in this kind of competitive storm chasing environment.
A professional working relationship or a romantic relationship? I
mean, either or. The within the context of your script, it could just be that they're the contrast to these two. They're just as excitable, just as passionate about the storm chasing, but they manage to make it work, whereas Bill and Joe can't, for whatever reason, right? And then maybe you can get some good banter between them, confiding in this couple individually about the problems and things like that, and you can get some mileage out of that. And in the end, I think that you could have more of a bittersweet ending with their relationship, where they've learned to work together, but they're still not going to be a couple. They're going to continue on as colleagues, but not, a romantic pair.
Yeah. I like that idea a lot. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but then you were really going to bat for Melissa as audience surrogate. Who then becomes our audience?
Well, I guess there could still be a Melissa, because they're still split, right? So he could have a young, sorry, Scott, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I've got a possible fix for that. Jonas is out in this version in Greg's pitch. And Bill is kind of filling that role. So he's got the slick corporate team. He's got this new technology he's about to unveil. Melissa is the TV reporter who's come to cover, because of course it's a big corporate thing and it's going to revolutionize science. So they've invited a reporter to come and see the magic. So, but she is just a reporter. She's not a weather person. So he does need to explain, he and his team do need to explain the science to her. And so she still acts as that audience surrogate.
Yeah. That's nice.
Yeah, she can have not only then are people explaining tornadoes and science to her, but some of those storm chasers are explaining the dynamic between Joe and Bill to her. She's like, why does it feel like you can cut the sexual tension between those two with a knife, or professional tension with those two with a knife?
Because she can see where the story is and she's digging for it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
that's a different fix, but it's a neat fix. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's I don't want to say 3 distinct fixes because I think, in a way, yours and Liam's kind of dovetailed into one another. But there's definitely a couple of interesting options that we've pitched.
Okay, well, let's see if we can meld them together. I think we can, because my whole thing was I just wanted their relationship to be more genuine and even. So I was just saying, like, she's got a death wish and she needs to work out her trauma. He's a control freak who can't let go. Everything I said there can apply to a professional relationship as well as a romantic one. So yeah, you can still jettison the romantic relationship and keep what I said. We do lose Jonas. So Scott's big fix. I don't know, but Scott, can you square that peg? Can you?
Jonas could still be in the mix. He just needs to be on one of their teams, right?
No. Because we're saying that Joe is a hothead, right?
Yeah. Right.
So like that allows you to have that tension where you've got this because all Jonas does is follow them around until the last scene where he goes it alone, and that's his big mistake, right? I think he lifts out pretty easily, and then Joe is the one creating all that tension by going where she shouldn't go.
And we keep Scott's thing at, like, the whole thing was like one of them made a heavy device with shitty balls and one of them made great balls with no device. That was your big revelation for Jonas. That can just be Bill and Joe's competing Dorothy's.
And I like that. I think Bill, with the corporate money, has the lighter, better sensor probes, but he accidentally built the deployment device too light because he was working in a lab. He wasn't thinking about on-the-ground conditions, whereas Joe has really crappy sensor probes because they were dumpster diving for technology and going and buying bargain stuff at the electronics shop, but she's got a big, heavy-duty deployment system that can be anchored. And so, like, it's only by coming together that they can make the system work. So yeah, you still have the slick corporate team. It's just not headed by Cary Elwes. He gets demoted to being like Bill's second in command.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
That's great. It's been a while since we've like taken all of our notes and sort of mushed them together. We either all come to the same conclusions or we all just pitch disparate fixes and then go, we're all very brilliant. So that was good. I'm glad we got there. And the other thing with that, whatever course we take of the notes we've given, none of our notes were for the tornadoes. Great job.
We're fine. Yeah. The tornadoes were doing great work.
See in your trailer. Yeah. All the action scenes work great. I really didn't have any notes for them other than some of that verisimilitude, like how is a semi flying and the Chevy's not. It all the action worked. So
yeah, I think the only change here is that we'd have to break it down so that the different action beats happen to different teams at first. So like one of the first tornado things, it's like Joe's team goes and makes a run at it and Bill gets to sit back and be smug because they failed. And then his team takes a crack at the next one and they fail. And then it's Joe who's like, oh, it's not so easy now, is it?
Yes, except for that's the second and third. I think the first one is still Bill and Joe in the truck and having to get out of the truck and hide under the bridge. And that can be like, it's just like before, just like when we used to work together. You're an idiot who got me in danger. Well, you're a try-hard nerd who, wants to protect his precious corporate resources. And I still think that initial conflict under the bridge is paramount.
So maybe the first tornado catches the two teams off guard and they both end up in the same truck together.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's okay.
I'm glad you brought up who's driving the truck, because I leaned over to Amanda, who watched the last half of this with me when she got home from work. And I was like, one character has said to another, do you want to drive? Like 50 times.
Yeah.
In that kind of condescending, like, don't backseat drive, I'm driving. But like, at one point, Helen Hunt's character is like, yes, I do want to drive. You took the keys from me. And I'm like, yeah, like there's a scene where he steals the keys from her, drives like an asshole, and then looks over at her and goes, do you want to drive? And nothing is said of it. It's like, of course you wanted to drive. You took the keys out of her hand.
I will say, I think we keep the bit about Bill's big, slick, brand new corporate truck, getting more and more destroyed as the movie goes. After Joe's truck gets totaled in the first incident. I also think that if Melissa's going to be a reporter, she needs to have a news van, and it needs to suffer a calamity toward the end of the movie as well.
Yeah. Well, we've fixed Twister. I believe our listeners had comments of their own. Thank you to everyone who contributed. Please follow us on social media when we solicit these notes. We'd love to read your thoughts on air, or better yet, come join us in the Discord. Tack says, I'm going to try to rewatch it. All I have is a 20-year-old memory of seeing it on a bus and halfway through wondering when the plot was going to start. And I think I just didn't get that the tornado chasing was the story. Like, I was expecting a kaiju movie or something, and the tornado was just a way to introduce the scientist characters. This isn't just about tornadoes, right? Right?
It is kind of just about tornadoes.
Yeah.
And love.
And love.
But, I mean, horror movies, comedy movies, disaster movies, that you need that human element. You can't just have... Or else you end up with a Sharknado, where it's just about the spectacle and everything in between is hollow nonsense. Right. I'm trying to think of like what is the best kind of like disastery action movie where I guess Jurassic Park. You care like crazy about the characters in Jurassic Park. The kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jurassic Park without interesting characters is just Sharknado.
Is just one of the later Jurassic Park movies.
Sure, yeah, that too. EC Feist says, kind of boring and overrated.
I don't know that it's boring, and I don't know that it's overrated. I think it's pretty accurately rated.
I think it's. I see what they're saying about overrated in so much as it's one of those ones that has, like, even if you've never seen it, you know it's that movie about the tornadoes.
Yeah.
And because of that, it is persisted in the cultural zeitgeist in a way that, like, Dante's Peak hasn't.
Yeah. I think this is, like, one of those movies where the marketing played a big role in getting people out to see it, because the shot of the cow being blown around by the tornado was pretty iconic. And you know, it's been parodied and stuff like that. So I think Scott's right. I think that it's generally rated right where you would think it is. Like I know Rotten Tomatoes wasn't around back then, but it does sit at like a 70% now on Rotten Tomatoes, which is, I think, pretty fair. You know, that's kind of where I would have it, like 3.5, somewhere around there. Seems right for this movie.
Yeah, and I kind of disagree that it's boring. There are definitely like some slow parts of the movie, and I kind of agree with Liam where it's like whenever there's not a tornado on the screen, you're thinking, when are more tornadoes going to show up? But the tornado scenes are pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know that I would call this movie boring. There were parts that were uninspired, maybe, but even when the drama was cringy and eye rolling, I was at least invested in it being better.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, ooh, I wish this was better, and not like, I don't care that this sucks. I cared that it sucked. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You could see the potential for a better movie in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of where I disagree with both of you. Like, I didn't have a problem with most of the dramatic scenes and the scenes where there were no tornadoes. I kind of actually like the relationship and the banter between Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton. I thought a lot of that was actually pretty good, and I got good laughs out of some of them. Like the thing that you pointed out, Liam, the I would like to drive. Do you want to drive? Yes. I thought that moment was great. And I think Helen Hunt is an excellent actress, and she sells that stuff very well.
I will say one of my favorite non-tornado scenes in the film is just them having steak and eggs at her aunt's house. Mm-hmm. That is, I feel that is one of the best like group scenes in the film, where we get to just see the tornado chasers being storm chasers and being friends and like hanging out, and we get a little bit of banter, we get a little bit more characterization from all of them, and I wish that there had been more of that with the whole team and not just Bill and Joe.
Yeah, agreed. except for the one beat in that scene when the Melissa's asking about the tornado ranking system. And she's like, oh, wow. So it's like a 4 is pretty big. An F4 is huge. And they're like, yeah, an F4 will move your house. And they're all laughing. And then she goes, what about an F5? And this like deathly silence goes over. And I'm like, okay, they're all it's not Voldemort.
It was a little melodramatic for sure. Yeah.
She hasn't like brought up some unspeakable horror. Like she didn't just be like, tell me about the Holocaust. Like it's a ranking on the scale you're discussing. It's the obvious next question.
Yeah.
Robin from Cinematological says Jamie Gertz is in a different movie and gives the best performance, grounded, emotional. When I saw it in theaters, I was so energized I wanted to race my car up and down the highway. The conflict with the corporate team is silly and they die horribly for the sin of being corporate. Twister also has the best score to soundtrack song transition in movie history when the score starts foreshadowing the Van Halen song. Also, the 4K is spectacular.
I believe it. Yeah, the soundtrack is pretty good on this movie. And Nita even at one point was like, the music's really like good in this movie.
Yeah.
Better in fact than the movie probably deserves.
Yeah, that transition he's talking about when they do the orchestral version of the Van Halen song, and then it just once they I think like the transition of the shot's really great too, because they go off the road and they go into like they start driving into like mud and stuff, and then that's when you get the really hard guitars and stuff. Perfectly done. Yeah. The other thing I'll say that I felt was perfectly done in this movie, and this is kind of unrelated, but having Philip Seymour Hoffman's character be the over enthusiastic, like totally excited about everything, thinking like this tornado that's ripping things apart is just cool and interesting, and then to have that character be the one that becomes super serious when during the drive-in scene when he has to tell everybody like the tornado's coming right for them, and then he is also the character that tells Joe that the tornado headed right for what's it called, Wakata?
Her
town where her aunt
the town her aunt lives.
Ant Town.
Yeah. So like that, like building that contrast of this character who's like usually quite boisterous and overly excited about tornadoes to have to be the one that just like, you know, takes all that down into like this somber, you know, moment is really brilliant filmmaking or script writing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I just wish that more of the team got better characterization.
100%. Yeah.
Moments like that. Yeah. And Aaron says, poor Jeremy Davies really got typecast as scared little guy.
Oh, that's because he's a scared little guy.
Which one is that?
He played Faraday in Lost.
I never saw Lost.
Okay.
Sorry. I didn't mean to make the sound before that. Sorry.
You rube watching Lost. Get out of here.
Well, that concludes another episode of I Have Some Notes. Thank you for listening, and thank you for following us on social media, whether that's facebook.com/I Have Some Notes, at I Have Some Notes on Twitter, at I Have Some Notes Pod on Instagram, or as always, please come find us on our Discord server. The link is on our link tree on our website and all the aforementioned social media places. We're having so much fun. New people are joining every day. We're talking trailers. We're talking movie corporate drama. We're talking armchair screenwriting. How did we fix the last movie we saw? So you can please come join us there, or at the very least, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on whatever podcast app you are listening to us.
Yeah, you can also give us some support in the form of your sweet, sweet muns. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/I Have Some Notes. Every little bit helps just to kind of keep the lights on around here. So if you'd like to help us stay in expensive pizza and electricity, you can head over to patreon.com/I Have Some Notes and help us out.
And next month, movie is to be determined. So I mean, one thing's for sure, we will definitely be fixing a mediocre movie, as that is the premise of the podcast.
If you have a suggestion, please send it our way.
And maybe not Twisters, though, immediately following this one. Though I have this sneaking suspicion it's going to end up as an episode at some point.
Well, until then, I've been Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
And I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies.